this morning about Decision Point America. Decision Point America. Ivy is an attorney, television, radio, and print commentator, and he does some teaching in college on political science at Union University in Jackson, Tennessee.
He has one of those resumes that you just like to borrow for a little while.
Yeah, he's done a lot, been a lot of places, and written a lot and spoken a lot on a wide variety of topics. Good morning to you, Ivy.
Good morning to you, Tim. Very good to be back here.
Thank you so much. Tell us about give us an overview of I know you're an attorney by trade, but what's your interest?
Well, let me say, first of all, I'm always a little wary when somebody introduces me as a lawyer because I know I have an immediate credibility battle. I'm starting at the bottom
to
of the
overcome.
hill.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you for going ahead and at least mentioning some other things that I've done with my life. And I'm not kidding about that. I'm quite serious.
I don't know what happened to – I don't know why. Well, I do know. I think I know the law profession got that reputation.
Used to be Perry Mason is what you thought about.
Yeah.
You know.
What happened from Perry Mason to becoming a joke?
Tim, I'm one of those lawyers who is openly and overtly critical of the American legal system.
Yeah.
So if you had 3 or 4 hours, I could give you the rundown, but you don't want to hear it, believe me.
All right.
We'll stick to something more uplifting.
But anyway, noble profession, just depends on, I guess, how you approach it once you get there.
When you need one, you certainly like them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Ivy, that's your daytime job.
Well, that's my tent making. You remember Paul's role?
Right.
That's my tent making.
What's your
what's my passion?
Yeah, what's your passion,
okay.
brother?
My passion is serving Jesus Christ. And whatever happens for the rest of my life, that's what I want to do as the primary focus. In fact, frankly, men, I get a little frustrated. I have to divert myself from time to time to representing clients. But I have to do that in order to be able to support my family. So I do that, but the primary focus is on the ministry, Decision Point America, and on the book that I wrote, Into the Night, The Crisis of Western Civilization.
Excellent book.
And your dad was, I was really impressed with him. I'll tell the story right quick. When I first came here and he saw that book, I had a copy that I had used that was printed upside down. In other words, the cover had been put on wrong. And I told him, he was looking at this one, and I said, Don, I'm going to get you, go out to the vehicle and get another copy and sign it for you. He said, no, I want this one. I said, well, Don, the cover's upside down on that. He said, I still want this one. And he went ahead and made a joke out of it, which I won't repeat here. It wasn't anything improper. But I thought that struck me, the humility in the man, that he would accept. He wanted to take the one that he knew we couldn't use for sales or whatever as his copy. Mm-hmm. And that made a real impression on me. But in any event, the book is all about the decline and decay of civilizations and how the characteristics of that feature of history is already very advanced in American culture. In other words, the cancer has metastasized.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, because you've obviously studied world history, human history, to lead to your understanding of where we are in the United States of America today.
And been around the world. He's reported from 8 different war zones across the world. So you don't just sit in an office and take pot shots. You've been around the world and seen much of it.
But about that, I want to ask you, as you look down through human history, up until the United States was birthed, was there anything akin to what we have here with a constitutional republic and the Bill of Rights and those kinds of things?
Very important question, and the answer to that is no. A lot of historians have referred to America as the Great American Experiment, which is a phrase I like, because what they're in essence saying by using that phrasing, Tim, is this is unlike anything that's ever been tried before. Now, some people would point to the Athenian democracy back just prior to the time of Christ. But what they don't know about that, even though it was technically a democracy, was that of the people in Athens, for example, I can't remember the exact figures, but I believe it was around 40% of the citizens of the people who were in Athens at that time were slaves. Now, you might have a democracy, but you see what kind of democracy that is. Mm-hmm. So you see that's not the same thing as the Great American Experiment. So you're right. This is unlike anything in world history, and quite frankly, if it collapses, there will never be anything like it again. This will be the end of that kind of experiment.
Do you think that? Do you think America is the linchpin in terms of all of Western civilization? I mean, in other words, if America goes, does Western civilization go as well?
Yes, we, of course, are the dominant feature of Western civilization. We're the leader. But, Ed, the thing that's sad about this is that you can already see in Europe, for example, this metastasizing of this cancer, as I call it, that has already moved even further. In other words, what we're doing in some respects already is following in the footsteps that Europe has followed, and to the secularization, so to speak, of the society, that sort of thing. And you can see this pattern. The thing that's striking to me about it is how obvious it is, and yet so little attention is paid to it.
We're talking to Ivy Scarborough. Ivy, the book that you've written on this subject is, as you mentioned, this is a big book with all kinds of
900 pages.
Yeah. But you know, hey, you can probably go through it in 6 months to a year. You know, but hey, you know, we need books like that are comprehensive, and we don't just need everything that need to be a USA Today article. You know what I'm saying? And so, how can people get this book or learn more about your organization?
The best way, Tim, and thank you for asking that question, of course, is to go to either one of two websites, either intothenightbook.com, intothenightbook.com, or decisionpointamerica.org. Decision Point America is the ministry, the 501c3 ministry that we're using as the vehicle by which to communicate these themes. The Into the Night book is the book itself. Now, I will caution people, because we're down to such a low level of the number of hard copies of the book, we've had to raise the price dramatically. But you can get the Kindle or the ebook version at a very reasonable price by going to that website, intothenightbook.com.
Oh, let's talk about this, keeping on the theme of the questions, Ed, and I just asked you about what a lot of Americans don't understand as we go through our lives here is we only know what our experience is. Oh, we have had a little history in high school or college, but we don't really know what our experience here is as American citizens, and the way we've governed ourselves, and the laws and the culture and things of that nature. But you mentioned before, America, the way of the world for all of human history had been kings, and rulers, whoever had the biggest guns or the most weapons, the biggest armies, they ruled the peoples.
Yes.
And there was no such thing as human rights or constitution. A constitution. It wasn't a constitution that. So I mean, it's just so foreign for the mind for many Americans to think in any kind of framework outside what we know here. So human rights were developed by Christian thought.
Yes.
Go ahead. Comment on that.
Well, that's exactly correct. In fact, what I say in the book, I describe how all of Western civilization, Ed, is built on what I call the superstructure of the Christian faith. In other words, every aspect of our culture in one way or another, even for people who are not Christians, is heavily influenced by that belief system. And in fact, the agnostic, secularists, and so forth among the sociologists and historians admit this. They admit that everything in Western civilization is based on Christian belief system. Now, this is the whole idea behind our republic. It's the value of the individual, that the individual is important, that he or she is significant. This was inherent in the teaching of Jesus Christ. That's where we get that concept. It didn't just come out of the ether somewhere with George Washington and Madison and Jefferson and so forth. That's where that originated. And so if you lose that, then you're breaking down the entire superstructure, Tim. It's very much like I use the illustration of the Statue of Liberty. You look at that from the outside, it looks like this huge, really strong monolith. But when you go inside, you realize that what's holding it together are these massive iron girders. Well, if you start disassembling those girders, eventually the whole thing's going to collapse. That's what we're doing in America. We're disassembling those iron girders of the Christian faith and the Christian belief system. And this is going to lead inevitably to the collapse of the culture.
Well, and one of the things about this book that even though it ties all these ideas to Christianity, you actually rely on a lot of secular sources. Yes. Peter M. Sorokin, for example, who is the founder of the sociology department at Harvard University, Spengler, others who from a non-Christian perspective present evidence that
yes.
actually underscores your major point and warning. And so this is not just simply you just riffing for 912 pages on, what you think is wrong with our culture. Oh, it's them young people, it's this, and that. Mm-hmm. You actually marshaled together, like a lawyer would, incidentally, the witnesses needed, and many times they are non-Christian. It's always fascinating that you can find the evidence to back up your position from people who aren't even Christian.
This is very gratifying to me, Ed, because out of the many times I've been interviewed about this is one of the few times that an interviewer perceived that. They saw exactly what I was doing, and you're exactly correct. What I felt like I had to do was to make this so authoritative that even the secularists and the agnostics would have to say, well, this is supported by history. The evidence is there. This is not just one man's opinion who's a Christian. And that's exactly what I did. I used matter of fact, some of the people I rely on the most, ironically, are agnostics. But what they're saying, Ed, supports the very thing that you and I and Tim would believe. And so I wanted to make that point because what I'm trying to say to people is that it's not just a matter of faith in Christ. You can actually perceive this from a historical standpoint. You can see the support for it. And that's the objective of the book, as a matter of fact, in many respects.
That's why George Washington, and there are others we could quote here, but George Washington, in his farewell address to the country, which, if you think about it, what more significant pronunciation or writing can you have than farewell?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Farewell, as in, I'm going to leave you with these things I believe, mm-hmm. and I'm going to tell you what's most important. Farewell address. So in George Washington's farewell address, in the middle of it, if I remember correctly, he sort of stops and says, yeah, I don't have the exact quotes in front of me here, but he emphasizes it in a few places. He says that religion, and by that he meant Christianity, religion and morality are indispensable pillars, I think is the word, or supports, mm-hmm. to human happiness, to the survival of this new country that we've created. How could a man have such foresight, or maybe how did he understand that? What did he's promoting something that today the secularists say, we don't need any of this separation of church and state. And here is George Washington mixing church with state all over the place.
Well, but forgive me for being so blunt, but that's foolish. What they're saying is foolish.
The secularists, when they say this?
You can't separate things out like that anyway. It's not rationally possible to do it. I make this point in the book. And what Washington was saying, as did all of the major founders, Madison, Jefferson's often quoted by the left, of course, but Jefferson himself said repeatedly in his writings, the only way that you can make this democracy work, this republic, is if the people are people of character who have a belief in a divine being and a moral law that transcends them. And he, again, was thinking in terms of Christianity. There's a lot of talk, for example, about him being a deist. I have seen far too much that he said that makes me believe that he was beyond deist. He was to the point, if he wasn't a Christian in some of his absolute convictions, he certainly heavily leaned that way. He even said, for example, that he shuddered when he thought that God was a just God. What he was referring to was slavery, and he was a slaveholder. Well, now, if you're a deist, you don't have that kind of concern.
Right.
So here again, you see
even Jefferson.
Exactly. Even Jefferson, that so many on the left and the secularists have tried to twist and manipulate what he said to justify their perspective. Even he was saying exactly your point. As Washington, there has to be a belief system that transcends man. And that belief system for these people was God in the Christian form.